Hello and welcome to the Rope Access and Climbing Podcast. I am your host, Mikey Stevenson, and today I'm speaking with one of IRATA's executive members, Connor Turley, on the topic of certification extensions. Us as technicians, we need to understand what our options are if we expire during the COVID-19 pandemic. If this is your first time here, please make sure to subscribe and follow us wherever you get your podcasts. Let's do a little introduction. Who are you? Where are you from? And what is your profession?
So I'm Connor Turley, originally from London in the UK, but I've been around the world a few times since then. Currently live in New Orleans in the US. I own a company called Altius Technical Services. We're an industrial safety training company that mostly specializes in rope access, both IRATA and SPRAT. So we have venues in various places around North America and the field. And I'm also a rope access level 3 myself, IRATA assessor, and I currently am the IRATA international training chairman, and sit on the IRATA executive committee, which is basically like the IRATA board of directors.
Okay.
I've previously been the SPRAT training chairman as well when I set up the SPRAT training committee a few years ago. But I think that's gone by the wayside since then, is my understanding.
Right. Okay. And you're still heavily involved with SPRAT, though. You still do SPRAT training down in the United States.
Yeah, definitely. Probably in the US, about a third of our training is probably SPRAT, I would imagine, somewhere around that. So yeah, we're a very active SPRAT trainer.
Okay. Great. So now our topic today is talking about rope access certifications expiring during the COVID-19 and what technicians need to know moving forward. I'd like to keep this isolated, the conversation between SPRAT and IRATA. Now that we are in North America, so those are the two organizations that we're going to talk about specifically. Yep. But I don't want to confuse anybody and just kind of mumble it into one conversation. I want to separate SPRAT and IRATA.
No problem.
Okay.
And there are some distinct differences in what they both said, but the one the association, the society have said in regards to expiring technicians as well. So it's good to get the clarification between the two.
Yeah, perfect. All right, so we'll start with SPRAT here. What is the current process for SPRAT technicians to extend their certification if they were to be expiring during the COVID-19 pandemic?
Look, as of the last notification from the SPRAT board, which came out in the middle of March, 15th, 16th of March or thereabouts, then technically they're not extending SPRAT technicians' certifications. And that's, I think that's one of the misnomers. You're not getting an extension for a certain number of days, this, that, and the other. What they've said is that they've issued a temporary variance to section 3.3.1 of the SPRAT safe practices, which basically says that if employers are operating rope access technicians whose certifications have expired and they can't renew it as a result of this pandemic, then they're still considered to be operating under the safe practices for rope access workers. So what they're not actually extending the certification, if that makes sense, but they're basically saying to operators, if you have somebody who's expired because of the pandemic and can't get recertified, then we are looking at them as if they were still in date. So as far as I'm aware, no SPRAT technician, such as myself, is getting an extra 20 days, 60 days, 100 days, in addition to their expiry date. The operators are being told, the companies are being told that if you're using an expired technician and they've expired because of this, not they expired 2 years ago, but because of this, then we still consider you to be following the rules. Same thing with the rope access technicians. If they're working and they've expired because they can't get on an evaluation, then hours they're logging now are still being counted as genuine and real hours towards an upgrade or so on and so forth. And also anybody that's expired now, even if they wanted to upgrade, it wouldn't be an issue. They're still being considered as being in date when they get to their evaluation if they expired because of the pandemic. So that, my understanding as of March, and I don't think it's changed since, there is SPRAT's position. So technically, there's no extension to the certification, but in effect, there kind of is. But that's really, again, down to the individual companies as to whether they want to accept an out-of-date technician for whatever reason.
Okay, I guess on that note, do you feel companies may steer away from that because of a liability standpoint? Because a technician is technically, not granted an extension. The person is technically expired. Do you think that that falls into
A grey area?
a gray area, or
Look,
or like
it,
are they covered?
there is look. That's an exceptionally hard question to answer. Right now, if you had a company, particularly if they weren't a SPRAT member, for example, and they were using a technician who's expired, and there was an accident, and perhaps, and I'll talk about here in the US, OSHA came along to investigate, for example, there might be questions to ask as to whether that technician is in date or not. I think really we're looking at the areas in particular that SPRAT work. We're looking at competency levels rather than actual certification levels. There's very little here in the US, different in Canada. There's very little regulation in the US that demands a certain certification for working in rope access, be it SPRAT, IRATA, or whatever. We know there is in parts of Canada, certainly in BC, Alberta, in Nova Scotia and Newfoundland, there certainly is. But right now, I think that'd be an insurance company question, really, to be asking. Is how do you deem your technicians competent? If you deem them competent by the use of a certification process, and technically that person is outside the certification process, yeah, there could be an argument that you couldn't prove their competency anymore. Sure, you can refer back to SPRAT statement of saying that the SPRAT consider them still to be competent, is basically what I'm reading between the lines, although it doesn't actually say that anywhere, but reading between the lines. So I think it's a very good question, and it's a very hard one to answer. And I think it's only going to be answered if, God forbid, something were to go wrong. But yeah, technically, as far as I'm aware, if you were to look at the SPRAT system, nobody is getting an extra date moved back. It's about basically saying that SPRAT members can still be considered to be working under safe practices for working rope access, which is their overriding document, even though they're expired, if they expired due to COVID. But again, there's no proof. There's no proof being offered as far as I'm aware.
Okay. Has any local regulatory boards made additional technician requirements over and above what SPRAT has stated that you were aware of?
Not as far as I'm aware. Certainly not in the US that I've heard, nor in Canada that I'm aware of. Okay. But again, like I say, rope access, as you know, generally has flown fairly under the radar for the last number of years in terms of regulation. We often get lumped into, certainly here in the US, Z359, the ANSI Z359 standard, which is regarding safe work at height and fall arrest.
Yep.
Z459, which is the new rope access standard, is in development, but it's not in place like yet. So at the moment, I don't think there's been anything extra that local legislative bodies have requested above, like you say, above what's been put out there.
Okay, perfect. Now, so that covers our SPRAT side. Let's just dive into the IRATA side. What is the current process for IRATA technicians to extend their certification if they were to expire during the COVID-19 pandemic?
Okay, so IRATA have a slightly different take on this, where they are actually extending certification periods for up to 90 days at this stage. If you have expired or are expiring due to the pandemic. So if you expired depending on what part of the world you're in, if you're in parts of China or Iran, for example, then you can go back further, go back through January, February. If you are perhaps here in the US or Canada, where our first cases technically, depending on which news site you want to watch, didn't kick off until maybe in late February, early March, then that's when your certification will kick in. What IRATA have really done, they've gone around the world and they polled all the IRATA member training companies, found out who's opened, who's closed, when they've closed, and so on and so forth, and made a judgment call on that. Based on that, you can apply in the month which you're going to expire. So if you're expiring in June, don't apply in April or May, unless it's very early June. Apply within 30 days of doing it. And you're being asked to give a reason, one of 5 reasons, I believe, as to why you're expiring. And it could be as simple as you can't get on a course because there's none available. You don't want to go on a course purely because you're concerned about a pandemic, even if there is one available, which is a very legitimate reason. You were on a course which couldn't be completed because of a shutdown. you completed the training but couldn't assess because of the shutdowns. There's various things like that. I do know there were some courses held in Eastern Europe and in Russia that the assessor couldn't get there, who was coming from Western Europe because of the shutdowns and things like that. So those guys were probably trained but then couldn't assess. Unfortunately, if you're a level 1, because you're not certified, you're not certified. But right now, you're being granted 90 days. IRATA is going to see what happens at the end of that 90 days and judge from there. So there may be another extension offered, there may not. At this stage, we have to wait and see. Like everything else, it's a very fluid situation. We're changing. But you have to physically apply for that. So that if you go to the IRATA website at irata.org, you'll find a link on there to apply for the certification extension. And you've got to fill out this little form, and there's 2 things you need to supply. One is either your IRATA ID card or the front page of your logbook showing your name, your photo, and your IRATA number. And the other is the last completed page of your logbook. Some people have been sending in the last page of their logbook, not the last page, the last completed page. We all know what's on the last page of the IRATA logbook. We want to see the last bit of work, your last bit of work experience you did,
Okay,
not the blank page at the very back inside the cover. We all know what that says. So just be clear, when it says the last page in your logbook, it means that the page that has the last page that has some writing, signed off work experience in there. Okay. So at the moment, that's the process with IRATA. So slightly different. So for example, right now, if you're expiring in June, you don't need to do anything. You don't need to worry right now. As you get closer to your expiry date, then you might want to go and fill that in. Numbers wise at the moment, it's not been massive. Off the top of my head, I think there's been 400 or 500 people. Yeah, about 500 people who've applied for an extension around the world. And that's out of somewhere in the region of about 80,000 technicians.
That's not too bad, actually. I was expecting the number to be much higher than that.
Well, everybody expires every 3 years, and divide that by 36 and divide 60,000. Yeah. And not everybody, some people are naturally expiring, so they won't necessarily be re-upping their certificate anyway. They're leaving the industry, or they move on to a different job, or so on and so forth. So,
yeah. Changes. Cool. There are some differences between the SPRAT and IRATA process. The biggest difference is IRATA technicians physically have to apply through irata.org themselves to get this extension, and they cannot apply within 30 days of their expiration.
Correct. It's certainly, if they do apply it certainly wouldn't be granted. So our advice is not to apply, because in that time, things may change.
Yes, and this extension could go on indefinitely based on the circumstances of the situation. I fully anticipate that conversation has come up within IRATA.
It has. Now, one thing I do need to make very clear right now with you, Mikey, I'm speaking as myself and giving you my opinion, and I'm giving you any facts that are out there in the public domain for IRATA. Yes. I'm happy to tell you what I think could or should happen. I'm not actually at liberty to discuss anything that isn't currently public knowledge from IRATA. But yes,
absolutely.
And on that, my opinion is, if we do need to continue extending, I do believe that we do need to have some kind of competence check. Yes. And that would, I would imagine, be some kind of online test type device. That's my opinion. That's what I think would probably have to happen. But like I said, that's not an official position of IRATA at this stage.
No, absolutely. 90 days is a long period to extend a certification. If we've talked, if you've heard in my past episodes talking about even that 3-year interval between level 3s, is a long period of time.
Well, if you think about it, if you were to do, IRATA currently allows you to come in and do your research up to 6 months early. Yes. And you will still get your original certification date. So for example,
that's 3.5 years.
So that could be 3.5 years. Add on an extra 90 days. At this point, we're 3 3/4 years. We're heading, extending beyond that. We're heading towards the possibility of 4 years.
Yes,
absolutely. A very long time. And the one thing to remember is that 3 years is actually quite a long time to start with, as you have spoken about. Yes. There are many professional type certifications, such as first aid courses, for example, around the world, are very, very traditionally 2-year terms. So even that, we're at 3 years. We're already a little longer than some other semi-equivalent bodies.
Yeah, absolutely. So moving on to some general questions here, and kind of touching base on the topic at hand. what should technicians be doing right now to keep up with their skills and knowledge? What are some pointers that you could give some people?
Well, look, as a trainer, I'd love to be saying they should be doing this thing they're doing all the time to keep up with their skills and knowledge. They should be
What?
practicing.
They should be reading the rule book?
They should be, well, reading the rule book is a start. It's a start. It's slightly a reference document. It would be a good place to go. So you should be reading, the SPRAT safe work practices occasionally, at least dipping into it. You should be looking at the IRATA ICOP originally, or dipping into it. One thing I always tell everybody who comes through my training centers is these books aren't novels. They're not designed to be read from front to back. They're designed to be dipped into. They're reference documents, much like an encyclopedia, if any of you are old enough to remember what an encyclopedia, like Google. You don't read all of Google. You go in and you look at the bit you want. Okay.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah, you don't go in and say, okay, Google, show me page 1 of the internet, and then keep going. You go in and you search for what you want. And that's the same with safe work practices from SPRAT and ICOP from IRATA, particularly the ICOP. It's a very large document.
Yeah.
So reading it from cover to cover is not something that I recommend to truth be told, unless you have trouble sleeping, at which point it may help. Mostly by hitting yourself on the head with it, giving the weight of it. But I digress. So yeah, certainly that's always a good thing, but always simple things like, I see just behind you right now, we have some ropes set up with some knots. Practicing knots is fantastic. The one thing that I see, believe it or not, as a trainer, is that when I have people coming back in on 3 years to recert and so on and so forth, at all levels, how there's been a slippage just in their knot tying because they've been maybe working in a field where they haven't had to do much in the way of complicated rigging or different rigging. And so their knot tying skills are really, really degraded. So things like that's important. There are fabulous videos and things online to use. There's this, for example, your podcasts and these video casts that you're doing are fantastic resources. There's also some more practical ones. There's Rope Test Lab from Richard Delaney coming out of the US. They have some lovely little small vignettes and small sort of snippets of stuff coming through right now. There's also, if you want techniques, there's actually a company in the UK called Access Techniques, run by a friend of mine, Adam Long, who have some great actual how to do certain things in the IRATA. We'll call it in the rope access training, literal videos of the techniques. Now, it may be slightly different to how some of your viewers have learned, and that's okay. You might learn a different way of doing something. You don't have to do it. There are many ways to do something. Other things like that, have a chat with people. You're all friends with all your workmates, or at the very least, you're acquaintances with all your workmates. Set up a little WhatsApp group, have a little chat, discuss a problem, pull out an old rigging plan and see how you would do it differently. Jump online and brush up on things like first aid stuff and that kind of stuff. There's lots of ways right now to use your time to get bigger and better. The most important one is just go back through the training manual. You were given a training manual no matter where you trained in the world, you were given a training manual. Go back through, have a flick through, refresh yourself with a few of the things, particularly stuff you don't do very often, particularly in the field. One of the big maneuvers that I see people not being very sure of when they come back into the training center to research is the passing a deviation, for example.
That is the worst. It's hilarious when you have a restarting level 3 come in and do a deviation, and you have in the same class, you have level 1s that you just taught the deviation, and they totally destroy the level 3 restart, and you're like, okay, this is what it's not supposed to look like, and this is what it's supposed to look like, and you just started rope access.
So, Mikey,
and that is definitely something that I see every single time.
Exactly, as you know from your many years of instructing rope access, it's probably the easiest maneuver we teach and the hardest one for anybody to learn. For some reason, it never seems to stick because people aren't using them in the field, and I get that they're not passing in the field.
Yeah,
but that's a real example of knowledge slip over time. I find it a very, very eye-opening and good example of knowledge slip, and it's a fairly simple technique.
And you can be on the job and practice this anywhere and everywhere. Like it's something that is utilized all the time, except for they're not ascending and descending through this maneuver all the time, but they rig up deviations all the time because they're quick, they're easy, they're efficient, right? But it's the one thing that slips away. People show up, they recertify, and they can't climb through a deviation because everything's rigged up above or below to avoid whatever reason.
Correct, and that just, like I said, that just shows the knowledge slip, and that knowledge slip is a big issue we have, which is why it's also, in my opinion, very, very imprudent, I will use that word, I won't use dangerous, I use the word imprudent of us to just extend with no form of competency. Because like I said, companies are obligated by law, generally in most areas, to prove that their workers are competent and safe to do the job they've been tasked to do. And for rope access, generally most people use a certification body and the certification scheme as their way of proving competency, which is a very good way of doing it.
It's a
But we
very good way.
correct, but we can't let that slip, and that's the problem. As an industry, I'm talking as an industry, we can't let that slip. Because at what point, God forbid, this COVID thing hung around for 12 more months and we were in shutdown pretty much everywhere for 12 more months, are we really saying that workers are now 4 to 5 years down the line still competent? When you and I know, and anybody who's gone back for reassessing themselves, don't instructors, know that that knowledge slip has done that over the 3 years, let alone over 5, and particularly over 5 when you're not necessarily working as well, slip may go. So I
Yeah,
think,
and on top of that, like because the knowledge slip while continuing education, and I'm gonna say continuing education as in they're still participating in the industry.
yep,
Now, if we're on lockdown, there's no participation. So that knowledge slip is going to be even more drastic. So as our line is going lower and lower, now all of a sudden it drops off
so
because we're not participating at all.
correct. So I'll give you an example, Mikey. You're a skier.
Yep.
And I'm a poor excuse for a skier. I was one of those very silly people who didn't learn to ski when they were 3 years old, but he added a 6 after the 3 and learned in his late 30s. Time to learn. And I skied. But I skied this year back in January, and it was the first time I'd skied in about 2, maybe even 3 seasons. I now live in New Orleans. The highest point in New Orleans is about 70 meters above sea level. Most of it's below sea level. There's not a lot of ski fields down here. And it took me quite some time to get my confidence and my feet back because the knowledge slipped, just because I haven't been doing it. Simple as that. Yeah. And that's true in anything. It's not just about rope access. If I don't train a course, which I haven't done now for well over a month, and maybe it'll be another month before I do train a course, I know full well that I'll be a little bit rusty. Yeah. Make it 3 or 4. And I've trained thousands of people through courses, as you know, but it doesn't mean that my knowledge won't slip because I'm not using it. So yeah, I do heavily encourage people to do whatever they can to try and keep relevant and keep current. Even better, use some of this time to get yourself to that next standard.
Absolutely. So kind of moving on, I guess it pretty much covers my next question is, but what's your take on online training? Now we've kind of talked about it a little bit here with maintaining that knowledge base, but with our current situation, I think that we're going to be having to be forced to rely on that online training. What's your take on that?
Look, I think online training has a massive, massive role to play in the rope practice industry in the future. Massive, absolutely massive. Yes, sure, we do have the type of syllabus, almost regardless of the association we're talking about now, the certification body. We do have the type of syllabus which really, really requires one-on-one, personalized, on-site, training. Yes. But there is also, and again, this is my opinion, there's also a massive gap between what we can train and what we currently do, which is about 4 days, particularly for level 3s, on the physical side, on the actual maneuvers, compared to how much theory we're training. I believe that there's a massive, absolutely wonderful opportunity moving forward to have online training complement our physical training. And I think it's going to happen. It's something IRATA has been looking at now for nearly 2 years, and we're getting very close to implementing some new things. For example, our testing now for instructors and assessors is all done online. So we have online tests, competency checks for assessors and stuff. We want to expand that out to perhaps include all testing being done online. So instead of filling out your questionnaires in your training center by paper, it'll be done online. It gives us the ability to measure the standard across the world as well. It gives people the ability to perhaps partake in some learning prior to their training course or after their training course. So we're not just relying on a few days every few years. So I think online training, if we look around the world right now, we're seeing lots of people homeschooling, we're seeing lots of universities moving their classes to online. I can see a massive shift towards the online training field. Mm-hmm. And I think for us as rope access industry, we can really utilize that. And I think it's going to be a massive boon to our industry. Because I think it will really reconnect the training with the technicians, whereas at the moment the only connection the training has with technicians is during the recertification class. So yeah, online training for me, I think it's a massive benefit. I think it's going to be the way of the future. It's going to be bigger than garlic bread.
Hey, garlic bread is amazing.
Yeah, I know, and I think it's going to be even better. The future is garlic bread.
That's a. Can I hold you to that?
You can hold me to that. It's going to be bigger than garlic bread.
All right. Now I've been talking about rope access seminars in a couple of my past podcasts and like getting people's feelings on that. You know, it's a mixed vibe. You get, oh, we don't need more training, or majority people are saying, hey, this is a cool idea. What do you have in mind? I have plenty of ideas on what kind of seminars. But I think where this really shines is for those level 2s and level 3s upgrades, trying to narrow that inconsistency between levels. And I think seminars would really help that out. It doesn't have to be anything extravagant. It doesn't have to be anything big. Just today we're going to talk about X. Tomorrow we're going to talk about Y, right? So what's your take on professional development seminars for the rope access industry?
Great idea. Why wouldn't we? Why wouldn't we is really the question.
That is a great question.
You know, why wouldn't we try and encourage more learning or the sharing of information or anything like that? You know, we already do it, IRATA and SPRAT, and because of North America, my North American, sorry, South Africa, my North American bent right now, I'm going to take those two.
Well, yeah, the majority of everybody on that's listening to this understands that both of us are in North America, so we're going to
100%.
primarily speak to.
And ultimately, IRATA is in number of technicians. IRATA is far and away the largest association in the world, and SPRAT is then second. So we are talking about the two in terms of technicians certified, the two larger numbers. But we already do that. These two associations somewhat through their AGMs and mid-year meetings and so on and so forth. But that's usually to a fairly small cross section. It's usually to company members and so on and so forth. But why wouldn't we put this out there? If you look at, for example, Access Techniques video casts I was talking about earlier, they have many thousands of views. Many thousands of views. So there's clearly an interest there. There are in every industry, like in ours, there are people that don't really care, want to get the minimum just to be able to go and do their job. Nothing wrong with that. And there's people perhaps more like you and I who are very passionate about A, our industry, and B, how we do things, and all things, you know, heights and knots and all the rest of it. And then there's the people in the middle. And so there are going to be those who won't be interested, and those who will be highly interested, and that's the same in all walks of life. So why wouldn't we want to do this? Why wouldn't we, like you're doing with your systems right now, want to share what we know, want to bring in people to share what they know, and see if people want to learn and try and engender the next generation of rope access technicians, or importantly, the next generation of executive members or training committee members, or and so on and so forth. That's that. We can't have a dying field. We're a very young industry. We're
very young.
The industry is younger than I am, which doesn't say too much, but it's a young industry. But we're moving on. We're getting to the point where the very early people in our industry are now coming out for retirement and moving on, and hopefully settling down for a more quiet life. So the next generation to come through. So things like seminars and any kind of interaction and sharing of knowledge, I don't understand why we wouldn't do it. I don't get it.
Yeah.
Why we wouldn't do it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's something that I'm trying to fester and trying to figure out what that looks like. And through the voice of my podcast and my video side of things, maybe I can start putting things out there and getting the conversation going and get more people involved. So,
well, look, we do it. We just don't realize we do it. We have lots of training centers and training companies that offer free sort of practice and play evenings or days. We have people out there who do companies and individuals who do other forms of non-mandatory training courses, advanced rigging courses, physics in rigging, all those kind of things. In IRATA right now, as you know, we have the assessors and instructors workshops, which we have once a year, which I think need to be changed and tweaked personally. But again, they're a good resource for people coming in. We do work a lot of the times as technicians and as trainers, we do work in isolation a lot. Particularly if you're a level 3 running a crew on, say, a refinery, you might be working with that same crew the whole time. You're the only level 3 on that crew. So who are you learning from? Who are you bouncing ideas off of? So it gives a forum for that. So I think to a point we already do it. How it's, your question of how that materializes, how that format looks, it could be various things. It could be large seminar types where some idiot like me stands there in front of 300 people and says, hello, my name's Connor, and today we're going to talk about this.
Yeah.
Or it could be smaller, local groups, support type groups, and you find them in, like almost like book clubs.
Yeah.
That meet up on a monthly basis for a few drinks and, hey, while we're doing it, let's chat about how deviations, you pass them and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I think it's a wonderful idea. I don't think it's a question of finding out how they might be formed. I think it's a question of finding out how many ways we can do this.
Yeah.
So the word seminar may not be the right term. I think what you're really advocating, which I think is fantastic, is a sharing of knowledge, a sharing of ideas within our industry. A, make the industry better. B, make the industry more expansive, so there's more job opportunities for us all, and most importantly, make the industry safer.
Yeah. Most importantly for myself is just narrowing that gap between levels, that inconsistency, and making sure that us as an industry is safe. That's my thing. So that's what I'm trying to achieve.
Wonderful.
So, all right. Well, that's all I have for you today. All right. So I guess to wrap this up, kind of, where can people find you on social media?
Everywhere. So, yeah, pretty much. It's all I've got to do these days. I'm learning Spanish and I'm on Instagram. So if you want to find me personally on Instagram, for example, I'm the Conman Turley, on Instagram, or if you just search for Connor Turley, you should find me. On Facebook, I'm Connor Turley. You can also search for Altius Rope Access, both on Instagram and on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. If you use LinkedIn, find me there. Also, if you go to the IRATA website, you can find my contact details through the IRATA website under the executive board as well there. But yeah, and also there's my obviously company website at altiusts.com. If you want to find me through there, you're more than welcome. And on there, I've got a few little interesting blogs and things as well, which may interest people.
Yeah. Speaking to the blog myself personally, for everybody out there, there's great resources on his blog there on the LTS website. Kind of shine some light on such topics as supervision. So go check that out.
Appreciate that.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much for your time, sir. And we'll have to do this again sometime.
Anytime, Mikey. Obviously, it's a great thing what you're doing here. It's really fun and informative. And like you said, it's a great way for people to get the actual answers. There's a lot of misinformation in our industry and things and all the rest of it. But if anybody has any questions, just feel free to reach out to anybody in the IRATA office or the SPRAT office. Will always help you. Both emails are almost the same as info@sprat.org or info@irata.org. They're almost the same.
Almost the same.
If anybody has any technical questions or anything like that, or reach out to anybody, any assessor or evaluator around North America. We always be more than happy to chat about this. And keep your skills up. And hopefully our industry will get back on its feet really, really soon.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, and have yourself a great day.
Thanks, Maggie. Appreciate your time. Take care now. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye. Thank you for tuning into today's episode. If you liked it, make sure to hit the like. Also, don't forget to hit subscribe. I have plenty more content coming your way. Until next time.